What's up? Just getting a little bit set up here after a couple weeks off. So I'm back, and today I'm gonna do something a little simpler. Actually, I've been doing patterns and more complex things with actions, but I realized. Sorry, I gotta mute this. I realized that maybe I should start with something a little more basic, just a website, which is a perfectly fine use case for Builder. It's made for all these more extensive things, but website's the first thing I built in Builder. So with all the new people coming in, I thought it would be cool to just do a simple website. So I thought about what could I do, and I need to redesign my work and whistle site, which right now looks like this, which is when I was running it as a no-code agency, no-code consultancy. But this is completely not accurate anymore. I don't really do client work, or haven't done it since I joined Builder. So for now, I think what I'm going to do is something more like, seems a little frozen for a second, one moment. Something more like this, where I still use Work and Whistle as the umbrella brand for all my projects. So I'll do a little intro, have something about these live streams, bring the blog back. I have a writing I do at x.workandwhistle. But bring that back and start writing more, and then listing current projects, past projects, and I have some ideas about maybe even potential projects. So anyway, it looks like this. It's a super simple site, but it's also kind of unique because it's got this left bar on the side with titles here, and these are going to be dynamic in here. So it'll be like a cool challenge to make. And then I have some plans for when it shrinks to mobile too. It's going to change the layout. So yeah, so I think this will be an interesting one. Sorry, something's distracting me down here. Oh, no, it's not muted. I had kept up like my live stream setup. I'd kept it open the entire time I've been live streaming for months, but since I hadn't been, it's closed now, so things are a little different. All right, well, I can't see the chat, so I guess I won't be answering chats right now. So I'm gonna start in, and what I'm gonna do is just take my time over a couple days and just build this and do, like all the proper component includes, some SEO stuff, like all the main things you need for a website. But I'd say largely this is gonna be like a CSS project, because what I'm gonna be doing is dropping elements and then styling it. But one thing is these projects are gonna each get their own page, so they'll come from a data collection, and then I have to decide if I want to remake the blog in Builder, which I do, that's what I'm leaning towards, or if I want to I have it actually on a separate site in Ghost. I could keep it there and then pull these in with an API or an RSS feed. Same thing. So yeah, let's get started. I've got a blank canvas here, so I'm just going to start going. And like I said, I'm going to take my time and explain stuff as I go. So the first thing I'll do is drop a homepage on. And really, I only have the homepage built, but when this is all said and done, it'll be a homepage, an about page, possibly all these blog pages, like a dynamic page for the projects. I think past projects won't get their own pages. And then probably some kind of a contact page. So when I start every like website-ish project, I do kind of like I set up my own kind of structure for that project. And the first thing I do is I make a section and I give it a class called section. And like, I don't know, I almost never even put anything on this class, but sometimes I have to, so it's nice just to set it up. So I do a section, and then normally what I do is inside the section, I put a container, which is like a centered column, because that's very common. But for this site, I'm gonna lock it to the left side and then give it kind of a max width instead of centering it. That's the plan now anyway. That design, I mean, I put that together. I was trying to get everything together for the last live stream and couldn't, so I put it together kind of last minute. So it might change. But what I'll have is a section, and then inside of it, what I would call a container, or I used to call it centered class. Oops. Just put that in the section. And so what I can do is add stuff to these classes that's going to make it always the same. And in this case, it's going to be really important because if you look at the structure of this, I basically got like a, well, that's not see-through. Let me fix that real quick. This is just to illustrate. I basically got a section here, a section here, a section here, and a section here. But inside those sections, I'm going to have this consistent width vertical panel. It looks like a vertical panel. And then when you go to a mobile size, they'll switch to be like gray headers that span the whole width. So to set it up, I just need to set a class and use that class on each section. And that class is going to be a CSS grid, I think, most likely. I'll know in 1 second. And that grid class will just define all this stuff. So I'm just going to start building that out. And I think, let's see. So container is going to contain, it's going to have a max width. So I'll keep that in there. Sections, I'll keep in there. I don't need to put anything on it. And then I think maybe this container class is where I'll make this. So let's just start in. You'll see what I mean. So I've got the container class, and I can look at this all properties view to find properties if I don't know them, but I do know CSS pretty well. So I come in here into this kind of hybrid view of used props. I could also write CSS, but I prefer the in-between. And so I know that I'm going to want this to be display grid. And let's see the best way to do this. And so I'll set up, I'll just set up the grid template, I think. So for now, this 200 pix might change, but I'm going to do a 200 pixel left column and really a 1 fractional width center column, and then a 200 pixel right column. And that, you know, if we're on a really small screen, that's going to change. So that's why I don't mind actually putting in that 200 pixels. But what that will do is that'll give me this 200 pixel wide, like light colored column. Then I'll have a centered column that's as long as it needs to, you know, it fills the whole width. And then on the right side, another column, even though it doesn't have a background color, got kind of action buttons out in this right column. So that should work for there. And then inside of each container, I would put 3 divs. One for the left column, one for the middle column, and one for the right. And you can see even how they're displayed here. Because I have the CSS grid property on the container, they're getting those widths. You can see this is 200, whatever's left over, 200. And then the other thing I'll do really quickly is put, oops, on this container class, I do want a max width, because if someone has a large screen, like my screen's pretty big, I'm only using a small portion for the live stream. If I pull my screen out really big, I wouldn't want that text spanning all the way across. So I might give it well, let's see what I did in Figma. It's like 1185 with 400 off. So yeah, maybe I'll do a max width of like 1200 pixels. Now you can't even see it here because this page on the canvas is less than 1200 pixels. But that'll help on bigger screens. And then I'm going to give each of these inside classes or inside divs their own class. So since that outside one was the container, I'm just going to use the same naming convention. Container left column. Container center column. I'm actually going to name these two. And I do this kind of like prep work, this naming and stuff, because it makes the rest of the build so much smoother. Like when I'm selecting these or you know, selecting the style somewhere else in an action. Just having things named sort of in a system is really helpful. All right. So now that it's set up, I'll do some styles on here to kind of start to match this initial design and see what we're working with. So for one thing, I'm going to need a background color on this one. Actually, I need a background color on the whole page too. So that's, and I know what that color is. Okay, so the first thing I'll actually do before I go style those columns is let's set that page body style to have the background color I want. So if I'm on an element, I can always go to the styling tab, but on the page itself, up in page properties, has its own styling tab with its own set of classes, just the same as any other element. So I could add a utility class and override this page body, but I might as well use the page body because that's coming default on every page. I want this on every page. And so I'll keep some of the stuff here. I'll eventually change this font, but I like how it zeroes out the margin, and height auto is probably not necessary. But maybe it was something for in the studio. I don't know. I removed it, so we'll see. So I'm just gonna add background color, and that color was that. And then like a text color, which will be like a default. Everything underneath will inherit it, and that's the one that I just copied. So now my pages are dark like this, and I want this left column class to be light. So put that back, and I'm gonna want the height. I wonder if I write 100% because it's inside of a grid. Oh, that might be 100%. Actually, there's nothing in it. Okay. And then center column, if I put something in here, like there's just a heading and some text in here. So I do heading, and I'll style these in a second, but this will just be to start building it out. Whoops, not that. Okay, and it looks like, yeah, that height's good to go. Let me make sure. I might not even need that height 100%. Yeah. Okay, and then I don't need to do anything to this one right now. Right column can stay as is. So it's looking decent, but I do want some space in between my columns. So one way to do that would be with padding inside. Like for example, this one, this word live doesn't butt right up against the edge. So I know that there's going to be padding inside of each of these. And the other way to do it is on the parent element, I can use that container and I can say grid column gap and give it a column gap from the CSS grid. So I've got some options. In this case, I think I'm going to control it with padding. The reason being I want this background color to be like end perfectly in the center. So if I use that column gap, it's going to be the 200 pixels, then a gap, then, so it wouldn't make as much sense, and I'd have to keep the gap consistent with the padding. So I'm just going to do padding. And so I can do the first one right on this left column class. And actually for this, I'm going to do it all the way around just because of the nature of these. These are like single words in here. So I'm just going to keep padding all the way around. And I guess, let's see if I can figure out an approximate value here. So it's about 40 pixels, and this is 200 pixels. So I could do padding as 40 pixels because I know that this is always 200 pixels. Or what I can do is I can do padding as rems or ems based on the text, or as a percentage based on the width of this column. I think what I'm going to do is actually keep it in a percentage for this one. Am I going to do that? For right now, I'm just going to type 40 pixels until I figure it out. I almost never keep pixel values. Even that 200 pixels here, I might change that to be like some percentage and a max width. But sometimes when I'm designing, I do pixel values because it's faster, and especially if I'm going off a Figma file like that. So I'll just do it like that for now. And then center column, I have a choice here, right? Like I can add its own separate version of padding. But you can see I'm already in a situation where now once I change this 40 pixels, which I know I'm going to, I have to change it in 2 different places. So I could, if I wanted, have a utility class or set up these containers column classes differently. I think actually what I'm going to do, because why not do it right, is I'm going to take a step back and set up basically a column class that each of these get as their primary, and that'll have the padding. And then I'll set up utility classes for left, right, and center. That's just a little more correct. And it's like, I don't have to care that I made those other classes. It's not a big deal. I can just leave them there, but I could go into media library and delete them if I wanted. But for this, it doesn't matter. So this would have container column, which would have the padding. .40 pixels. And then this one gets container column. And we have this new utility class now, or container column left. And this one, all we need is that background. Now I'm sure it'll get more later. That's all it needs for now. Oops. All right. So that's just a little cleaner. And actually, like, for now, it's a good other point is that I don't even need a center class yet. I might later, but I don't even need one right now, and I don't need a right class. So that's pretty good. And what I can do now, I might set these up a little bit more before I do it. But what I can do now is I have this section. So for each of these sections, I'll just duplicate it. And then this will all work and everything will line up nicely. But I think before I do that, I'm going to do a little more styling just in case I add more classes or something to each of these, because I can keep going for a little. So the first thing I'll do is add in some of the actual text. I don't know if this is the final text, but this is semi-real. Actually, I want to do this in 2. Kind of a small note about what I'm doing here. It's normally you would, when in most no-code tools anyway, you would type in a text box like that and you'd press enter and do line breaks. But when you're coding in HTML, you don't actually do enter with line breaks. You do a p tag around every paragraph. So instead of pressing enter and having a line break, you start a new p tag. And I actually mirror that when you don't have to do that in Builder, but I mirror that when I build in Builder to where this is its own text paragraph, its own p tag, and then this is its own text paragraph, its own p tag. And these, in fact, are literally p tags because you can change them if you want to something else. These are just p tags. So that's why I do that. I kind of like separate everything out. And it's like in Figma, I just type in, press enter. But when I actually bring it into code, even though it's no code, I separate them. So that's that. And then this was a little heading. And these definitely need some styles. And then in this one, I have kind of like a logo thing there. I call it a logo thing. I don't know. It's just what I'm using right now. So here, I'll just do this with an image. And instead of a data URI, come from the media library, where I can upload from my computer. Oh, you know what? I don't have this as a great, well, this isn't actually the correct file, but that's okay. It's kind of close. Okay. Give it alt text. All right. And then there's a button over here. So I'll just drop the button. Now I have on a button in Builder, you get a default button class. And this default button class is blank. And the reason for that is now I could style my button for this site. And every new button, when I drop it, will have the button class and look like that. So it's a good system. But in this case, I'm starting on a non-standard button. So this is going to be my standard button here. And then these are kind of like a crazy button, a different button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first style this, even though it's over here, and then add a utility class to turn into that. But now I'll have my buttons done. So, and actually soon, I'm going to have to do the font sizing soon so I can see this really well. But I do know some of the stuff that's on here. Like I know it has a border. I know it has a background color that's transparent. And I know I'm going to need to change, no, actually, maybe I don't need to change color. So a border of 1 solid. I don't need it. If I don't set the color here, it looks black, so maybe I'm wrong. I thought it would be like a default. That's just saying, or I could actually write transparent. Yeah, I do need these. So color will be, whoops, that color. And background color, I mean border color would be that color, and then padding. And for this padding, I use 1M. That way, when I change the size of the button text, when I finesse that, the M relates to the size of the font in there, so it'll still, in theory, look good. What did this one say? About Drew. And so before I make that into an action button and like vertically center this stuff, I gotta grab that font because it's just hard for me to see without the font and size. So if I come back to my Figma file here and just select, this is kind of like the default text, like the paragraph text. It's source code Pro, which is a Google font, and it's size 14, and there's some other stuff like a -1 letter spacing. So the first thing I need to do is add source code Pro to Builder, or to my project in Builder. And I've got Google Fonts open here. So I just search for it. And what I'm doing is first I'm selecting the weights that I need from Google Fonts, and then Google Fonts gives me the link. I'm looking for that link, and then I'll add it to Builder. One thing I know too from my Figma file is that I've got the regular weight. I've got, I think there's a semi-bold for the button. And then up here I've got a bold. So I know that I don't need extra light. Did I use light? I don't think I'd use light. I don't think I need light. And I can go grab it later if I do find out I need it. But I do need regular italic, don't need medium, need semi-bold, semi-bold italic, and bold italic. And so these are the fonts over here that I'm going to get with this link. And here's the link. It's inside of some code. So if you don't know what this is, or like how the fonts work in CSS, basically, really what I'm looking for is this link here, which is, you can see in this case, when it's in a link tag, it's link href equals, or in this import tag, they have import URL, and they just have a link inside the URL. That's what I'm looking for. And then the other thing that I usually copy and paste is the exact way they type the font for when you declare it in CSS. And then I can come back into Builder, come into my design library and hit the fonts tab. And I feel like I should mention, but there's a new interface that's about to be released, and it makes finding these things like the media library and the fonts much simpler because they're all exposed on the left side. So in the future, if you're watching this anytime from like, a couple weeks on, a couple weeks out, you don't have to actually go to that menu. You're actually going to see a fonts icon on the left side. So once you get in here, you hit add new font. And this right here, font URL, is where that link comes in that I copied. So I put that there. I specify the font family in the way that they want me to, the way that Google says to here. And then in this case, they recommend this mono space for a fallback. So I can set that to font family fallbacks. And that's in case for whatever reason this font doesn't load, or whatever. You can actually set a multiple fallbacks if you want. And then name is just for me. Create the font, and I'll know it works because I can see it correct in here. And now I can use it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my body class, my page body, and set the font one time for the whole everything. So I do that, and that'll cascade down into every other thing. So you can see the paragraph tags and the heading and everything. And it looks like button overrides that, so I'll have to re-override it for button. But the font looks a little big, so I need 14 and -1 letter spacing and a line height of 28, which is like 2M. So that's what I'll set up as kind of the default, and then we'll just change that for like headers, and for buttons we'll override those. So I'm on page body already. font size, 14 pixels. And one of the things that I do personally, I would recommend it, but everyone builds in their own way, is I set the font size in pixels one time on the body class. And that's the only time I use pixels ever. After that, I set every other thing. Like say I wanted the H, this might be an H1 or an H2, some kind of heading tag. If I want that to be twice as big, instead of setting it to 28 pixels, I set that to 2M. The reason I do that is because then for responsive design, if I'm shrinking down to like a phone size and I just want to shrink all the text site wide, I can put the media query. So say like when it gets to an iPad or a phone size on this page body class, change that base from 14 to 12 or 14 to 10. Everything else is sized in M's, so they scale accordingly and the whole site scales. Like it just saves a bunch of headache and hassle. And that's the same reason I mentioned a second ago why I do the button padding in something like M's. Because then if the base font size shrinks, that padding will also shrink because it's relative to the size. So that's just a little tip, but obviously not a big deal. It's a little bit easier to just type in a font size, but there is a trick where if I know my base font size, it's 14 in this case, any other font size I want. So if I want this to be, like 32, I can just do 32 divided by 14, my base size. And that number is the M's I need. So in that case, whatever it would be like 2.5 or 2 point something. All right, so that's all in. I want to make sure that the button class uses that font too. So I'm just kind of like re-specifying it here. Oh, and I forgot to actually finish some other, that letter spacing was on there, and I think I wrote line height. So I come back to page body just to finish out. Font size, okay, line height I got 2M, which I did. 28 divided by 14 is 2. It's 2M. And then there was a letter spacing of -1 pixel. So that looks pretty much like that. It looks a little crowded to me on here. So as I often do, like once it gets into the code, this is the real output. So I might tweak a little. Like I think that 0.5 looks nicer. And then color's good. So I think that's all good. So next what I'll do, since I'm setting up these sections, basically, I want to get this whole section pretty good before I start copying it to the other ones. So one thing I noticed is that it's not vertically aligned. And I think I'll be able to do that on this container class just by saying align item center. Nice. And then now I'm seeing that maybe I did need that height on this left one of 100%. Yep. So that's good, except that now that image is not, oh, you know what? I don't want that image centered. So this is good for the top, although maybe I will. But the way this design is, that this is a line top all the way in the top, but these are line centered. So I might do like an extra class on these follow-up ones to align them center, but that's pretty good. This one, so let's style this. Oh, you know what? I gotta do this header real quick. Let's check what it is. So this is bold 16, 28 line height, which means there'll be a different calculation for that. And then the same -1, so probably -0.5. So what I need to do is I can decide first what that should be. Technically you want an H1 there, but I don't know if this really constitutes an H1, but that's all right. Oh, wow. Pasted all this extra Figma stuff. Let me just type this in again. Okay. So I made that an H1. I really don't want it to be an H1, but that's okay. I'll do a class. So what I do in Builder, this is another thing. This is like one of the few areas where I diverge from HTML a little bit, or like how I would code it. But in Builder, they have a heading class. Like you get a heading class when you start. And I set a lot of things in there like that are universal to all the headings. But then I do a utility class for each type of heading. So a utility class for heading H1, heading H2, heading H3. The reason I do that is because semantically, or like if you think of it for like a screen reader or something that's not seeing your design, you want everything to be in the correct hierarchy of like H1. Like this is the top of the page, so I want it to be my H1. Even though it says hey there, it's not really a good H1 text, but I want it to be the H1. But really, like, I don't want all my H1s to be barely styled. You know, this in the design is barely different from the text. So maybe that's actually like an H3 style or something. So what I can do is I can keep it in H1, which is great for accessibility, and then style it like an H3, which will change the design. So it's kind of a bonus that you come with just this heading class, and then you create your own classes for the other H1, H2, H3, and then you set it what they are in the properties. So there's HTML tag, that's where you set what level it is. And if you don't set it, by the way, there are some differences. Like the browser has default differences between H1, H2, H3. So you could just leave the heading class and not mess with the font sizes, but I find that I usually just need more control than that. So in this case, I'll keep it in H1, but I'm going to give it like a, I don't know. I'm actually just going to call this H2 for now, but maybe I'll change that later. It's just a matter of changing the name. And this is where I'm going to add in my new font size. And so here's an example. I don't know if you'll be able to see. Oops. Yeah, I think you can see that. So I just do 16 divided by 14. And I get 1.142, whatever. I just paste that whole thing in as the M's. And that's the same as saying 16 pixels. And then font weight is already bold by default. But just to be like extra clear, I'll just make that bold, which is 700. And I think that's all I need to do there. It did have a line height, so I guess just to be thorough, the line height was 28 pixels, so it's not 2M anymore. It's going to inherit 2M. 2M would be 32 pixels. So again, I can just come in here and be like 28 over, in this case, the base font size. It's got to think hard to type that 16. Come on, this is crazy. My live stream window is also flashing as this is happening. I don't know, my computer can't take the live streams, I guess. This is wild. I can't even get out of it. I'm pressing escape. I'm just going to give it a second. There we go. Try it again right away. So what I'm looking for, the 28 pixel line height over the 16 pixel base size, 1.75. Nice and clean. All right. So that's, in theory, matching that. It looks a little different in Figma versus the actual web. Like this is rendering on the web as it would on the web. So when I see it, you know, maybe I will want to change it to light. Maybe not, but all right. So that's pretty good. I think the last thing for this top section is to style this button as this kind of like weird pneumorphic button, which also bad for accessibility. You can barely tell this is a button. So I surely will change this, but for now it looks like this. I'm just going to match the style. So in this case, I have the button class. Oh, and you know what? There's more styles in that button class. Let me finish that out quick. I'm jumping all over, but no big deal. Because this one, so I got the border correct, and the font size is the same. It's like 1M. It's the same as the base font size, but it's semi-bold, and the padding is not even on all sides. I don't think. So let's see. So actually the padding looks fine. That matches. It's a little tricky sometimes with like margins and padding when you do these things, but visually this looks good to me, and that's really what I care about. So I'll just leave the padding as is. But I will go into this button class and set the font weight to semi-bold, which in this case is 600. And the way that you can find that out if you don't know the number is that on Google Fonts, or if you're using Adobe Fonts, it used to be called Typekit, if you look back at the original font you're getting, it tells you right here, like medium is 500, semi-bold is 600, bold is 700. So that's how I know semi-bold is 600. And just for good measure, let's do font size 1M. All right, so that's what the buttons will look like. And now let's override that all. So keep button class on there, but add a utility class for button. We call it action button. It's not really an action button, but it works. And then action buttons where I'm just gonna start overriding the properties. And the way that it cascades is the primary style class comes first. Those styles get applied. So like background color transparent gets applied, but then utility classes overwrite that. So if I have the same property background color, it'll override it. And so like to remove the border, I actually just explicitly set a border to 0, none, or border none. And then this one has some drop shadows. Oh, it's a group. Whoop, hang on. All right, so it's got these drop shadows. So if I look at these drop shadows, they are in Figma, they call it a drop shadow, but they give you the exact properties that you need in CSS box shadow. So I just need to copy these numbers and letters. So it's negative for X and Y with a blur of 16 and a color of 2022. So I would go box shadow. And this is just because I know CSS. I know how to write this. But it would look like that. That would match the properties. But this one has 2 box shadows. So I also need to grab this other one, which is a 4 instead of a -4, same blur, and then 0, which is all black. And the way you do 2 drop shadows in CSS, I think you write a comma. Maybe you just do a space. I'll try that. Comma. You just write your next one in line. Yeah, that worked with the comma. So you can barely see that, which is why it needs to change. I don't want people to miss those buttons. But the last thing I'll do is just to match is set the border radius. It's set to 10 in Figma. So I just come to here. Oops, border radius 10 pixels. And sometimes with border radius, you know, I just said I never use pixels. I actually usually do with border radius. Sometimes though, I would use an M for something like that. If you want the actual roundness to be proportional to the size. In this case, I don't. I just wanted that 10. So that, oh, and then in this case, I want that button centered. And I could do that by adding a class to this right side and centering it, kind of like something similar to the left side. But in this case, these action buttons, they're action buttons. They're always going to be centered. I kind of know that. So I'm actually going to do it on the button itself. And to do that, I set display block just to give it a width, or like not a width, but to give it a block position. And then I do margin left auto and margin right auto, which is just a way to center it in CSS. There's like 20 other ways if you don't know the auto thing, and there's plenty of other ways you can do it, but I do it like that. All right, so that's pretty good. Even as far as like this, the padding I feel like is going to be good because the space in between the rows will have that padding here and then one below it. So I like that. So let's copy this section here and then start to fill out another section and see what it looks like. So in this case, in the left column, I don't need this image. Whoops. Kind of a feature, actually, good to mention. In Builder, there's no undo right now, which trips people up at first, although once you get used to it, I don't miss it at all. But if you do delete something like I just did, there's this show deleted, hide deleted toggle down here, and you can always restore. So I meant to delete this second one. And in this case, I'm going to start this system where I kind of have a heading here. And really these headings are my H2s, so I'm going to change that to an H3. But this will be an H2, so this will be a heading. It'll be an H2, it already is. This first one's for live. And then this will give it, what I'll actually do first, just so I don't confuse myself, is change the name of this to H3. So now that's the H3 class. And that updates everywhere. Like here now it's the H3. But I'll come back here and I'll go heading H2. And so the first thing I can see is that the color is blending to the background. I could change that on the H2, but really I don't want that on the H2. If I use an H2 over the dark color, I want it to be the light color. What I really want is this left column to have a color. So I come back to any of these container column left classes. I just set that color. Okay, so now we can see it. And now this one is not bold in my design. It's regular, size 22, and a little bit closer letter spacing. So for H2, just gonna say font weight regular or normal, which is 400. I'm gonna say letter spacing. So I changed it from 1 to 0.5, so maybe I'll just try 1 for this. All right, -1 for this. Jeez. And then the font size, and again, I'll do that calculation. Come on. So I'm gonna put do not disturb on real quick. All right. So font size 22. In this case, it's going to be over the base size over 14. And then M. All right. Pretty good, pretty good. And then the content in here is just a little different. So don't need that. I'll keep this in here because I can just write. Ooh, something's going on with this one. I noticed just now when I pasted it, the display says text box, but it's not actually displaying text box here, but the display text is incorrect. I have a feeling it's from pasting from Figma. Oh, weird. I don't know what's going on there. In Figma, if you copy, see like this has it, I didn't even notice, but if you copy it directly out of Figma, it comes with some styles on it. What you can do is, well, I don't know the best way. It depends on your system, because actually I realized I use a multi-paste tool, but I can actually, if I do a specific command, it pastes without formatting, it removes formatting. So that's really all you want to do there. You can do that by like pasting it into like a code editor or a Word document or a text document or something, and then recopying. But that happens all the time, especially when you're copying off the web. Like it'll just pick up styles. Okay. Oh, you know what? Actually, in Builder, if you paste into the display text box, it's going to always remove those styles. It's only when you paste in here. So I reword that. I recommend just pasting directly into the display text if you run into any problems. All right, so this one will say is not currently live. I did this thing on my live.workandwhistle.co site where there's a button to take you to Twitch, and it uses the Twitch API and actually figures out if I'm live or not when the visitor goes there. So I figured I'd put that here too. Just have this button where it would say like, watch now on Twitch if I'm live, Drew is currently live, or something else if I'm not. I'll set up that functionality later, but for now, that's what it is. So I'm going to drop a button in here. And this is going to be the view on Twitch button. And then here's a good example of that P tag here, because the P tag, which is block level, to bring it to the next line, I can just change this tag to span, and then it'll pop up on the line before it. And then in this case, you know, maybe I'll just do a quick inline style to give it some space. 0.5 M. Just a little space. All right, so that's decent. And then this button should say view site or something similar. Okay. So at this point, two of the sections are in, and it looks pretty close to what I'm thinking it should look like. So let's live view it. And live view, before I click it, I'll just explain a little, is it is a preview, but it's actually better than a preview for all these reasons that we know and that we talk about. And it's much better to build with, because what it is, it's an actual live view, but we realize that that's very confusing. So in the future, this is just going to be called preview, and it's got a little eyeball icon like what everyone's used to. But essentially, this live view is like the preview. And what it's going to do is it's going to pop open a real actual site. No, there's no wrapper that's like showing a preview. It's the real, you know, the real code that executes live. But it's not actually your live real project. So if I publish this and then I make changes, live view is a way to see those changes without affecting my actual live site. So it's never broken for my visitors. So the first time I go to live view, if I don't have any URL route set, it's going to ask me to set like a root page, like the /. So if you just type the domain of whatever this domain is going to be, well, it's going to be workingwhistle.co, whatever it's going to be, the /, you need to just choose a page. I only have one page to choose, so I'll choose home. And I set it now, that's all I have to do. And in the future, when I click live view, it just opens. So the first time it loads up, oh yeah, it looks pretty good. So I've got this column on the left. I've got my max width, if you remember. So this is a little wider now. And everything looks, I mean, it looks decent. This is pretty much what I'm going for. So I think now what I'll do is fill out some more of the content and just play with those styles. I try to keep it to an hour, so I've got like 13 minutes left. So I'll just keep going. But I think this is pretty cool. I think one big thing that I know is coming up, actually maybe I'll do this beforehand just in case, is for responsive. You know, it would look crazy on a phone size. I could probably even just hit a phone up right here. So I do have to make changes, and maybe that would be good, you know, to do that before I start populating all the rest of the content, just in case something in my head, like, oh, I need to structure that differently. Then I won't have to go restructure every one. So let's do that quickly, or not quickly. I'm not in a rush. And so what I want to do, I don't have a design for that. I wanted to design it up in Figma and so I could show a comparison, but I didn't have time. So what I wanted to do is basically when you shrink down, just close all that. When you shrink down, maybe have it this, well, what is the title, which is on the left side, maybe have that go all the way across in just like a little band of light color and then a centered word. So I'd have like the W, some full phone width content, then like a banner, like not a banner, but like a bar of color, and then it would say live in it, and then that content. And to do that is like pretty trivial with CSS Grid actually, or it should be. So we'll see how it goes. But I think what I'll need to do is just go to this container class where I have the grid, and I have the columns are set up here. They're just controlled with this one property. So what I can do is at different breakpoints, I'll change those columns. And so I think what I'll do, let's check with like an iPad. iPad Pro is good how it is. iPad is fine how it is, I'd say. So I'll start on the phone size, which I'll start on this one, which is the landscape phone size. And if I hover over, it says it's 480 pixels. Now, in the new UI, the new release that I referenced earlier, there is a way to set a custom breakpoint, which there's not right now. So right now, when I build in Builder, I stick to these, you know, these default breakpoints for my media queries for responsive design. But when I used to do a lot of, more code, I would actually put a lot of different breakpoints on a lot of different pixel sizes and be really specific and designy with it. So I'm like pretty pumped that now in Builder you can do that. I mean, I'm doing it in the test version already, but soon everyone will be able to do that, where you can just set, in that case, I would have actually come into this page and like really looked at it and said like, okay, like when does the design break? And I can see up here, it's showing me a pixel value. So I might say like, yeah, maybe around here, 700 pixels, say, and I would set that as a media query. In this case, I can't really do that. Like I can choose 480, 768. Maybe I'll just use 768 because that was a lot closer. But I just choose from these. So 768, I'm on all properties. You can see I have these properties set, and I have this one set as the grid template columns. So if I click on the iPad size, which is the 768, and just change this, that creates a media query in the code. You don't have to know that, but that's what's going on in the background, to where when the width of the browser window gets to 768, it'll start 768 or less. It'll use this value that I'm typing right now. So what I want to do, I think, is just one FR at that point, which is saying one fractional width or 100%, because I want each of these three columns that are side by side to stack. So, and you can see it works. So I'll need to change stuff obviously, but when I come to, and you can watch the pixels up here, when it hits 768 or lower, it stacks. And so what I'm going to do now is just at the same breakpoint, I'll keep using that iPad size. I'll go to like the class for the left column and just change some of it to make this centered and that kind of thing. And whatever, there's some more stuff I'll need to do, but it is actually pretty close. And actually, now that I'm seeing this huge header, that might be kind of cool on mobile, kind of quirky. Maybe I'll even keep that, but we'll see. But this section of content looks good. The padding all around looks good. This one, it looks like there's no, I didn't add any, or did I add the column class? I might not have added the column class to this right column, so that doesn't have padding on the bottom. So that might just be the fix. Let's check that real quick. Yeah. Container column and container column. And then, so yeah, that put the padding back. And I do want that padding on the sides here. So look, it looks weird. I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do with that, so that doesn't line break there. But probably if I were like this, oh yeah, it stays in there. So I'll figure that out. But that is more what I want. So let me put that back so we can view it. So this is actually all pretty good. I'm going to leave that for right now. Might change it later. Let's just style this up a little. So this would be the left column class, and I can come to any of them, select in here. And what I want to do is I want to do now a property that doesn't exist on this. So one of them, I want to change the padding. I want that bar to be a little thinner. And the other one is I want it to text align center. Actually, do I want that? Maybe I don't. It's kind of like digging a left justified thing. Maybe I'll keep it left justified actually for now. I think I will. I'll change it later, That's like the beauty of it. You just it's so easy to change with this visual editor. Like visual development it's such a paradigm shift. Like you don't really even have to think about it. You just try it. If it doesn't work, try something else. You put it in there, you come back 2 days later, it doesn't work, boom, boom. So it's so easy to change stuff, so easy to rename systems. I'm really a fan. So let's see. What I have to do now, so this one's like a one step more complex with the media query, because I want to do padding. I want to basically say padding 0, but it's actually getting a padding from the container column of 40 pixels that I want to stay, because I want the other container columns to keep that padding. So I'm going to come into just the column left class, and I'm just going to add a default padding of inherit. And so you can actually probably go right here and select inherit. If not, I'll type it. Oh yeah, okay. So that's inherit. So basically the reason inherit means inherit whatever it's getting from its parent. It's like the default. Actually, no, it's not the default because it overrode that. So maybe I'll just have to explicitly say 40 pixels for now, just so that I can come in and override that in a media query. And I think I don't want it to be like 0, padding, but maybe like a 0.5 M. Missed M. Okay, and then, oops. No text line center right now. All right, so that is more the bar I wanted, but actually I do want that padding on the side back. So when I come into this media query, I'll keep it 0.5 on top, but 40 on the left, 40 pixels, and then 40 pixels on the right. All right, cool. So that's pretty much what I want. And now when I add more in, it'll look nice. It'll break those sections up. And then I'll do something with this button, I think, differently. Like this is a little wonky, but I don't know what right now. So for now, I'll leave it. All right. Everything there is still good. Nice. So I'm almost done. I'll probably wrap this up rather than dive into something new. But I'll do a wrap up and touch on what I can do next time. But before I do, one last thing is I noticed these buttons don't have a hand cursor. So I'm just going to come in here to this button class and go cursor pointer. And now they look like buttons. All right, cool. So yeah, so I'm going to wrap there for what I'm building today, but it's looking exactly like I want it to, exactly like this Figma file. And then the next step is I'm going to start some of these more dynamic sections. So I'll do a blog section and a project section, a couple of different project sections, but I'm going to build those off of collections, which involves using a grid element to list each record from the collection. And then I'm going to do single pages for all those. And I think because I'm doing this live stream and because I'm talking about all this stuff, it makes more sense just to build the blog. Like I'd rather have it in Builder probably anyway. And then I can stop paying for the other one. So I'll probably just build the blog out, and that way I can pull from the actual data collection and control this stuff. But that'll be next time. And then really like that's all the site is. It's so simple, but it'll feel really good for me when I can get this live, because I actually don't have anywhere that showcases all my projects, and I especially don't have something that shows past projects. It's like I usually only promote what's active. So I'm looking forward to it. And I think based on how fast this went, it's probably going to be a fast build, just 2 to 3 more live streams, and I'll probably be good to go. So thanks for watching. I'm going to do this again on Friday with the one caveat that my wife is expecting any day now. So if we go into labor, I will not be live streaming. But if not, on Friday I'll be back, same time, just continue on this build. So thanks for watching, and see you next time.